My Visit to the Rabbit Room and Why It Was So Hard to Leave by Derry Bloom. I uncrumpled the bit of white paper that I'd held clenched in my left hand for the last 15 minutes while walking through downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. On it I'd printed with a rather odoriferous marker the address 611 Archenland Place, and beneath it the words, The Rabbit Room. I'm here in this lovely up-and-coming town because I love transformation. This town, once equated by most as nothing more than the land of the Amish and homemade handicrafts, has become an increasingly popular haven for the arts and culture from sources both domestic and abroad. One can easily find here on a Friday evening, especially in warmer months, eclectic groups of people of varying ages and backgrounds dotting the downtown in search of a hidden art gallery or inviting music stop. The place I'm seeking today, by what I've heard, feels like the flickering candle of a marvelous idea that for years I've just known was coming. My Clarks pad along old gravel and ancient brick that leads me past readers bustling in and out of a well-attended library. It glows from within, in contrast to dusk's cool dark blue. I flatten out my walking map framed by my wrists as I hold it up toward myself. It bids me turn right. It is then that I see it. Looming before me and slightly to my left crouches a large copper-colored warehouse whose hundreds of glass window panes, like a great compound eye, spill from within it light, conversation, and life. I rehearse in my mind all that I'd read about the Rabbit Room, and fighting the urge to sprint inside, I favor firstly taking in the circumference of the place from without. I don't want to miss a beat. I face only half of myself toward its outstretched great doors, the breadth and height of which are testament of radiant craftsmanship and care. As I slowly sidestep while fixing my gaze on the place, I make it turn in my mind, enjoying its artistry, like a well-appointed Thanksgiving plate in little hands, before digging into the most anticipated meal of the year. As I reach its starboard side, I'm overcome by wonder as my middle-aged self arrives gasping alongside the inner 14-year-old me that is clearly leading the way for us right now. Before me is a great gallery of 6 equal-sized panels of wood that span the length of this bubbling place. They are certainly at least 20 feet tall and have on them, painted in a style reminiscent of 19th century wood prints, images of a stately-looking and bespectacled rabbit enjoying himself in both the pursuits of intellectual immersion and common relaxation. I let loose a giggle of delight as I squint up at the astute bunny, now perched on a well-worn fringed pillow. He is reading by candlelight as shadows dance behind him against his books. It's getting darker now, and soft floodlights from within a phalanx of small, fragrant flowers snap to life, giving the rabbit mural an orange glow. And above it, in great storybook letters, The Rabbit Room. I've had enough anticipation, I think. Without continuing around the building toward what suspiciously looks like a small garden, I hightail it back to the great doors. Sitting on the edge of a light blue antique rocking chair and nearly spilling off of it is a plainly dressed young man masterfully playing a beautiful mandolin stained a deep cherry red. The notes of the old Shaker hymn, Simple Gifts, take flight from the musician's nimble fingers and mingle among the guests. I see a gangly, freckle-faced college student wearing a patchwork knapsack regarding a leather-bound volume of Tolstoy just within the Rabbit Room's threshold. Standing near him are presumably his college mates. They beckon him further in. I am willing at least, so in I go. I pass a quartet of silver-haired gentlemen sitting in high-backed leather chairs. Each of them, though smiling, seems to be talking over the other, save for a handsome old chap fast asleep, with an untouched mug of coffee next to him on a tiny table. He wears a name sticker that reads, Jim. I notice finally that the beautiful wood floor is painted in little paths by sets of gold rabbit paw prints. Delighted, I notice a small group of school-aged children head off to follow one of these trails. It ends at a small but rather ancient-looking bookcase marked Young Readers. The children breathe out an excited whoa as they're opened book after book about tractors, animals, mummies, and more. I think to myself, the Rabbit Room is a bookstore. It's now that the peculiar smell of rich coffee gently begins to pull me deeper still within. I continue along our way, noticing what looks like an enormous false tree stump, whose front is a tiny, roughly hewn wooden gate, and within it a semicircle of violet cushions, presently hosting a family of 4 who are reading together aloud without a care to the world. Awesome, I whisper. I approach a vast shelf of books, whose bottom third is spotted by more rabbit paw prints. Above it is a sign that reads, The Inklings. Having read the Rabbit Room article, and having had a very learned mother and father that loved to read, I can tell you that the Inklings were a group of English writers, many of whom were celebrated professors in fine English universities. They would meet together on Tuesday or Thursday evenings in a pub called the Eagle and Child in Oxford, England, from the early 1930s to late 1949. There they would critique each other's work and discuss subjects like philosophy, religion, or just the affairs of the day. The room in which they met was called the Rabbit Room. Their two most widely regarded members were C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. It is these authors that inspired this place to exist, says founder Jason Zimmerman. In the space between the wave caps of booktops and the wood above them, I can see past this place to the backs of students, grandparents, clergy, professors, and children of many races enjoying themselves together and engaged with one another in the space of a medium-sized cafe beyond the bookstore. I recall the foreshadowing of Jim's untouched mug as I grin past the shelf, and grabbing a book from it, I step inside. I think to myself, the Rabbit Room is also a cafe. A round table near a curious indoor lamppost, presumably electric, hosts a group of two young men and a woman. They call me over. "You must be Derry. Thanks for wanting to write about us," says the bearded and kind face of Rabbit Room founder Jason Zimmerman. I recognize him from the previous article that I'd read. Proper introductions are exchanged as I meet the other two. The first is an attractive young lady with flowing brown hair. Her name is Jennifer Dunn. Though her springy dress and artsy shoes are lovely, it's her energy and personality that really stick out in front. "Jen's the coffee part of this think tank we have here, Derry. We mostly just try to keep up with her, though," says the boisterous yet composed Jason. Which brings us to Dave. J. David Seyfried is a 6-foot-plus tall fella whose head is adorned by spiky dyed blonde hair. Not surprisingly, this many tattooed man, as Jason explains, is the main artistic director behind the Rabbit Room and is in part organizer of the Rabbit Room's youth and art program. Jason begins to pour ice water from a handmade gray ceramic pitcher with strokes of violet blue. It sweats from its chilly contents, sending up a frigid puff as it's tipped. He slides the glass toward my outstretched hand, noticing that I'm still quite awestruck by this grand place. He cocks his head to one side and beckons me to look up. I do, and instantly turn a little red that I hadn't thought to do so earlier, for there above me are about a dozen colorful flags, suspended among rough wooden beams, embroidered with mysterious animals and symbols. Not recognizing a single one, I conclude they must be representations of some well-regarded fictitious lands. Jason explains. They're all countries that exist only in Middle-earth, or Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and Narnia, C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. And in here, he continues as he thumps his chest over his heart, smiling sideburn to sideburn. Jenny rolls her eyes and erupts into laughter, as she can only pretend for a moment not to share the same passion. Just then, a tall woman in a green dress, led by a young scampering girl dressed quite similarly, stopped by our table briefly on their way out. Jen, I want to show you my test," says the little girl whom is introduced as the woman's daughter. The little elf of a girl whose name I learn is Malia lifts a small ruled page with a large yellow star in front of her face as she giggles from behind it. Jenny squeals and snatches it to give a closer look. "Wonderful, sweetie, you really did it, Malia." Jenny's excitement is contagious. You see, this place has become an extension of the community it serves, and in some ways a model for it. The three proprietors explained to me how none of their employees are just employees. They're not just baristas, not just cashiers or stock persons, not just managers or carpenters. The people working here all have our